February 19th, 2022. And today, I guess the situation is, topic has kind of gone back to the situation in the Ukraine-Russia crisis. It looks like as of this morning and yesterday, we're starting to see contact developing between the rebel forces within the Donetsk area, I think it is, that are attacking Ukrainian military forces with shelling. Basically, I don't think there's any ground assaults going on at this point. Ukrainian military can handle any attack, I think, from these insurgents, which represent people from the Russian ethnic areas, backed by, of course, Russia. So that's going on now, and I think everybody's been talking, will it be a false flag or something? And I think whatever you want to call it, I think this is perhaps an effort to induce the Ukrainian military to attack these people more aggressively, and then that would trigger the Russian invasion or whatever you want to call it. So that's kind of the situation as I see it right now. It's developing, and it looks like the Russian military is rapidly getting to the point where they're ready for their jump off, or will be shortly. On the positive side, if for those of us who consider peace to be positive, I think there's a meeting supposedly going to be between our Secretary of State and the Russians on next Thursday. So if the attack doesn't happen until Thursday, I guess we've achieved some delay. My thinking is it would probably occur after the end of the Olympics, since Putin doesn't want to steal Xi's thunder, right? I mean, since he's probably the only real ally he's going to have in this thing, that would make some sense that he wouldn't want to do anything to offend the Chinese. So they might wait till later on Sunday or Monday or something at least. If they wait all the way to Thursday, then at least things are slowing up somewhat. And we again don't know exactly what the Russians' angle is at this point. Anyway, if you like these videos, please again subscribe, give me a like, which helps out with the algorithm. Thanks to those recent subscribers we've had, I appreciate it. And any comments you have, you can post, of course, if you're a subscriber, I think, and so forth. And anyhow, yeah, getting on with this. So that's kind of the way I see it right now. I'm not sure exactly, we're all trying to figure out, Biden said yesterday that he thinks that Putin has decided to attack. And let's put it this way, if this is a bluff, it's a very expensive bluff, both in terms of actual resources and also in terms of prestige. And as I see it, the biggest problem here is the complete intransigence of the Ukrainian government and to some extent the United States backing it up to the degree it's going. It looks like the central issue that the Russians are pushing for is, will Ukraine someday become part of NATO or not? And it looks to me like the idea would be to simply offer them not. If they reject that, then it's pretty clear cut that they have grander ambitions than simply them not being part of NATO. In that case, our position would be very justified, I think. But on the other hand, if that's really what they want, and maybe some issue about the status of Crimea, and I've mentioned that before, as I understand it, Crimea really is inherently Russian, but that it was an administrative decision to move it into the Ukrainian Republic back in the Soviet days many years ago, in the early 60s, and essentially when the Soviet Union fell apart, Ukraine just got inherited by default. There was no vote or anything. It's just they just took the state territories that existed in the Soviet Union and just simply said, well, those are all countries now. Something like if the United States were to fall apart and California would become a country. Or Texas would become a country and New York would become a country. They only had like 15, but that's essentially what happened there when the overarching central government just collapsed in 1991. So you've got a group of people that are fundamentally Russian under a hostile Ukrainian government that doesn't much like Russians, I don't think. I think that the vehemence that they're fighting this thing can show you that and this goes back to, I've mentioned before the Holocaust that Stalin imposed upon them. It got to the point that when the Germans came in the World War II, many of the Ukrainians saw the Germans as liberators. This is how bad the repression under Stalin was, which was considered to be Russian, although actually he's a Georgian by ethnicity. But at any rate, the point I'm getting at is there's a lot of deep-seated hostility there. I think that's undoubtable. And so you wouldn't have an insurgency that killed 14,000 people over the last 8 years if there weren't some people that really were in with the insurgency. That's kind of the view I have on it. And we're totally not taking those people's opinions into consideration in these matters. It's like they don't matter and Russia don't matter, even though they're a nuclear power. And we think that the economic whip will bring Russia to the heels. And that type of thing has happened before, but it generally leads to actual shooting war. I mean, whatever you can think about World War II, the Pearl Harbor attack was triggered largely because the United States tried to destroy Japan economically. I mean, because that was why it happened. Now one can argue, well, that got us into the war. Unfortunately, we beat the Nazis and beat the Imperial Japanese and did a lot of good things. I'm not talking about the consequence of that, but I'm saying this thing can trigger something a lot worse than just the invasion of Ukraine eventually. The most likely thing would be a full-scale cyber warfare, I think. I mean, and that could occur. I don't even know if this is going to even work. And right now, one thing that could be holding the Russians back is right now there's a meeting over in Munich which we have Kamala Harris on the scene, finally trying to show her foreign policy credibility. But at any rate, there's a bunch of senators there and everything else. They're trying to negotiate something with all the NATO allies on what the reprisal is going to be if they invade Ukraine. And of course, the big problem is like the Germans have a lot of dependency on natural gas from the Russia eventually. And of course, the problem with that is that, the Greens are in the coalition government with this socialist government, just like they were in the Christian Democrats that were previous to this. And in both cases, they're determined to end nuclear power in Germany, so they need natural gas to replace it. And of course, they nearly had this pipeline finished, and the big debates, will they open it up? Or will they get the one they have now closed down? I mean, that's another issue. So I don't know. There was some talk of cutting them off from economic, the so-called SWIFT system for currency and economic transactions. But if you do that, how can the Germans pay for their natural gas? And if they don't pay for it, it's unlikely that Russia is going to provide it. So they're going to be in the cold, so to speak. So these are the kind of issues that are playing. A lot of mistakes have been made as far as European security over the last many decades, which have left them in a sort of a somewhat impotent position. I mean, right now, we couldn't really field an army in the near term to stop the invasion if we wanted to. I believe at this time we now have about 3 brigades over there. We did have 2 at the beginning of this, but we did send in a brigade of the combat team of the 82nd Airborne, I think it is. So, which is a very elite light infantry unit, but I mean, it's not going to be able to counter this massive force that the Russians have put out. And it's mainly there to show the flag to tell our NATO allies we're still with them. And I guess our nuclear deterrent backs that up also. So, that's one of the things that's potentially in play. We can just... But the Russians are now demonstrating their nuclear capabilities today with a lot of drills of their strategic forces to show that they're ready for action too. I think that's probably meant as a warning that, don't push it too far. And of course, that's a whole issue. We probably a little bit beyond the scope of this video, what could happen there. I don't think that's immediately in play. And so what really is a bit is, will they or won't they, is the first question. If they do, what will they do? I've discussed this thing before a little bit, but I still wonder if what the Russians' plan is just to move into the areas. There's 2 areas inside of Ukraine that the Russian government, their Duma or whatever, has approved of being essentially annexed into Russia. And those are areas that are very close to the Russian border. And, of course, to annex them, you would have to sort of take them. But I don't think there'll be much local resistance in that area anyhow. So it's possible that the attack will be very limited toward just taking those areas and then pushing back the Ukrainian military, destroying it as much as they can in the process, and then trying to negotiate a deal at that point. And of course, then if the Ukrainians refuse to negotiate, then the more dramatic attack on Kiev and so forth would then go forth. I mean, obviously, the West has the economic whip, and Russia has the military whip right now, if you want to look at it. And so, and when the military thing does, a lot of people get hurt. There's a lot of refugees, a lot of casualties, and so if the Chinese are standing by them, which is an interesting question, will they? It may come to the point that the humanitarian crisis becomes more pressing than the political goal of preserving the territorial integrity of Ukraine as it currently exists, or not. I don't know how far this goes. I mean, a similar thing at the beginning of World War II. Remember, the big dispute that launched the World War II was over a corridor because World War I Treaty of Versailles had separated two parts of Germany. There was a kind of a Prussian area, and then there was the core of Germany around Berlin. And they wanted a corridor in there, and the British stood firm behind the Poles to say no way, which led to the total dismantling of Poland in World War II. Of course, it would have probably happened anyhow with a madman like Hitler. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that I don't think that Putin compares to Hitler for a number of reasons, and therefore I think he can be negotiated with, but you have to have two principles. You have to have some accommodation to his point of view, and you have to have real strength deployed to block him if he doesn't go along with the deal he's made. And right now, we don't have either. So, at any rate, that's kind of my opinion on that, and I'll wrap this up for now, and until next time.